Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Corey Camp, and today we have my good friend TJ Hoffman with us. TJ is our Chief Operating Officer here at Sibme, and prior to joining Sibme, he managed the new teacher induction for Houston ISD, which is a huge overtaking. It's a large school district. He coached on technology implementation in schools and has worked for 10 years as a teacher and school leader. So welcome to the Coach Replay Show, TJ.
Thanks, Corey. I'm excited to join you today.
Yeah, me too. And I'm really excited about this topic. It's a really timely topic. It's something I remember talking a lot about years ago. I'd bring this up a lot in my topic, and I've kind of gotten away from that in training sessions, but it's perfect for this time of the year because we're in the thick of it. We're talking about coaching through difficult times in a teacher's life, and specifically a common time for all teachers, DEVOLSON, which is the difficult time for lots and lots of teachers that everyone's going through right now. It kind of hits everybody at the same time. So TJ, tell us what DEVOLSON is.
So it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek play on, I think, something that we've seen from lots and lots of research about lots of sentiment surveys of teachers around the world, this time of the school year. And the nickname or the acronym is the dark, evil vortex of late September, October, and November. It's something that I found a couple of years ago, actually, when I was working on a blog post for Sibme. I had never heard of it, but I read another blog post by a teacher who was talking about DEVOLSON and her experience with it. And it reminded me actually of something that I experienced when I was going through training with the New Teacher Center and learning how to train new teachers and mentor new teachers, and some work that Ellen Moore had done. And we can look at this little chart if you want to. So the developmental phases for the first year of teaching. This was something that we learned a lot about and that I really took to heart when I was working with new teachers over the course of my career working with new teachers. And sort of that, over the course of a school year, on average, a teacher feels a certain way about their job. They feel a certain way about how they're doing at their job, but also just sort of, whether they want to come to work or not, sort of just things about that. And it follows after, she surveyed thousands and thousands of teachers and found that it sort of follows this trajectory. It follows this line over the course of, the American school year that starts in August and ends in June or July. That essentially, at the beginning of the year, we have this sort of anticipatory phase where we're all really excited about the coming school year and all the hopes, but that very, very quickly we sort of dip into a survival phase where, all those hopes and dreams, all those lesson plans that we'd spent the summer working on, all those things that we worked really hard to go to conferences about and learn about and do book studies and all that sort of stuff, meets reality, right? And it meets the everyday reality of school. And we start to sort of feel like we're just surviving in our day-to-day lives in schools. And then, that place kind of bottoms out in DEVOLSON this time, late September, October, all the way through to the end of the first semester where we go through this sort of disillusionment phase. And as I was working on this blog post, which by the way, I can't find on our blog. So if anybody's watching this and you find the blog post and post it in the comments for this, we'll send you a prize. Because remember what that blog post.
Yeah, help us find our own stuff. That'd be great.
But it really made me think about, well, this isn't really just a phenomenon for new teachers. This is a phenomenon for lots of teachers in a lot of different contexts. At the end of the first semester and going into that holiday break, that semester break, a lot of us feel just overwhelmed and kind of like, I have to handle one more thing other than what I'm just coming to work to do on a day-to-day basis, I'm going to lose it.
Yeah, we're exhausted.
Yeah. It's a hard job, right? I mean, it's an incredible job. It's isolating. It's stressful. You don't really have any downtime because you got kids in front of you all day long. And So, after 2 or 3 months of that, it can get really overwhelming.
Yeah, I think that's why we're so anxious for that winter break. I think that time of year also, you've got your winter holidays, your Thanksgiving, your Christmas, your all the holidays that we celebrate are the things that we do over winter break, and just all life in general outside of our schools, plus all the things in our classroom. That survival period was me realizing that I did not have as much time as I thought I did between the start of school and starting to get to know my students and parent conferences, which started in October. Like, that's really when I started feeling like, okay, my hair's a little bit on fire and I'm just surviving. So here's the big question, TJ. How do we coach or adapt our coaching to working with teachers during this period, recognizing that this is a common period? So it's definitely something that we should probably do a temperature check on with our staff and kind of see where everybody is. And I bet we're going to be seeing that this is truly the case on a lot of our campuses for a lot of our teachers. So how do we adapt with that? And I know that's what you wanted to talk with us about today.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there are some important things to think about, and I think that some of them are common sort of, common beliefs about what it means to be a good coach in general, but become really important, especially during these stressful times. I have heard hundreds of times talking to lots and lots of coaches around the country that, one of the most important parts about being a good coach is to have a good relationship with the person that you're coaching, and that's an incredibly important thing. So, I couldn't agree with that more, and I think that that's incredibly important. I think that sometimes we gloss over what it really means to have a relationship with someone, and that there are times when it's really easy to have a relationship with a colleague, with a teacher that you're working for or working with. And then there are times when it's not as easy. And I think especially when you're not really super close to somebody and they are going through a tough time. And let's be honest, the coach is experiencing DEVOLSON too. Like, everybody out. Those relationships can be really, really hard to manage and really difficult to balance. And so, I think of this not as necessarily a challenge as much as it's an opportunity to sort of go back to basics. And one of those basics that I think is something that we all instinctively know as teachers, but that we don't always apply to adult relationships, is this concept of the ratio of interactions. There's been a lot of conversation about, what's the appropriate ratio of positive to corrective student relation or student interactions? How many pieces of do I have to give for every corrective action that I have with a kid, right? Lots of conversations about that.
Right.
I think that we have a tendency to think that somehow that concept goes away when we start dealing with adult relationships. And I think that's silly. Like, I think that's crazy. Like, if you're mean to me all the time, I'm not going to want to, learn with you. I'm not going to deal with, your constant onslaught of telling me the things that I need to do better. And so this is an opportunity to do some things to really build up what my mentor, Jean Duffy, who is the greatest mentor of all time, and I've literally testified before the Texas State Legislature about how great she is. Way
to go, Jean.
One of the important things that she taught me was that you have to think about the ratio of interactions not as a mathematical equation, but as a bank account. And so what that means is, a bank account you put deposits into and you make withdrawals out of. And those deposits are positive interactions, and those withdrawals are negative interactions or corrective interactions, not necessarily negative, but something that the person with whom you have that relationship is going to perceive to be somewhat uncomfortable or negative or something like that. Right. She is the example. Jean always used the example of her grandchild, who, she said one time she was doing something with her grandkids, and Jean was sort of a notoriously tough teacher. She taught Algebra 1, she taught remedial Algebra 1 at the school where I taught. And, I mean, she was stern to say the least. And, but, she talked about her relationship with her grandkid and how, she and her grandkid loved each other and they have a good relationship and they spent a lot of time together and all this sort of stuff. But that one time she had to get on to this kid and, and sort of give some redirection and something. And she wasn't nice about it. She sort of put on Miss Duffy, the means to do it. And she said, how do you think my grandkid perceived it? And, this sort of thing was like, oh, well, you're her grandma, and all this sort of stuff. She said, no, it's all kids are the same. And I think this is true for all people. All people are the same. If your bank account has a nice, healthy balance in it, you can make any kind of withdrawal from it, and it's going to be okay. So this period of disillusionment is a bad time to make a lot of withdrawals from that bank account by constantly coming to someone and saying, okay, here's something new you need to do in your classroom. Here are the things that you're doing wrong. Here are the things that you need to fix. And the tricky thing about that is frequently during this time is when a lot of those things uncover themselves.
Right, really your classroom management, yes.
Yeah, things fall apart, right? And so that's when, as a coach, I go in and I think, oh my gosh, all this stuff is happening, and all these things are going wrong. I need to, provide this teacher with some support. This is my perception of it from the coach. I need to provide this teacher with some support so that they can get out of this. They're drowning. They need someone to come in and throw them a life preserver. But think about it from the other perspective, right? Really what that is corrective behavior. You're telling someone something that they're doing wrong and giving them an opportunity to fix it. And that can be a negative withdrawal from that bank account. And so you just have to think about how much of a healthy balance do I have with this teacher? If we're not really, really close with one another, then if I just come in and only do those things where I'm correcting them, then I'm making withdrawals, even if I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart and my desire to, do what's right for kids and all those sorts of things. Me telling you to do something and you not doing anything different doesn't do any good.
Right.
I mean, that's pointless.
Well, and I think it's a really important, I love that analogy. And I love that kind of reminder because, we've got to remember that many instructional coaches, especially here in the US, they were amazing teachers one time before, and they did amazing things with the young learners in front of them, but they haven't maybe had as much training on working with adult learners and working with other adults. And it's a whole different boat. And one of the things I struggled with was I always had a pretty good sense of, can I make a withdrawal, and putting into that bank account ahead of time, but I struggled with when it was okay to make that withdrawal, then it was like a big amount. And then, okay, you did that. That's amazing. Let's do now this one. And I did too many big withdrawals in too close of a time without putting some things back into it. Like that was something that I frequently fell into. And if that happens, especially during this period, it can really be detrimental. So that's one of the things that I'd like to talk about is this is such a large part of that school year, that disillusionment, the DEVOLSON period. What are some things that we can do to still make this time a productive and conducive time towards our work together with their teachers? How do we go ahead and navigate that?
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of things you can do, and some of them are seemingly kind of silly, like they don't seem like they're that important, but like one of the things that you can do is you can take some time to make some deposits into that bank account. Go through and do seemingly kind of silly things, like, giving little, buy a muffin, bring it by, make cookies for all your teachers. It's pumpkin spice time, get some lattes or something like that. Like those things seem not that important, but it's a deposit. It's a little deposit, but it's still a deposit into that. And then you can make some larger deposits by really going in and finding things to celebrate about what the teacher's doing well. And I mean, sometimes that's hard, right? Like sometimes the thing that is to celebrate is you showed up to work today. And that's, that may be the thing that you did well, but really just strengthening that balance in in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing that I often think about, I was a big, when I was in undergrad, you know, working on sort of those foundational education courses, I loved Maslow. Like, I was a really big fan of that. And anybody who's taken the new teacher induction course at the Sibme Learning Center knows that I spend a ton of time talking about Maslow and the new teacher. But, you know, like focusing on some of those foundational things that if you don't have those, you can't learn, right? So do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel a sense of social belonging? Do I feel, do I have my basic needs met? That sort of stuff. You know, this is the time when teachers are skipping lunch. They're not doing those sorts of things. So, I mean, you can do a lot of good by saying, hey, let me cover your class for the next, 20 minutes or something like that. Or can I help you, make copies or something like that? Those sort of like things that don't feel like coaching are real in that relationship. But then the big picture is, find those things that they're doing well in the classroom so that you can celebrate them, those low-hanging fruit, or find a goal that's really small and really achievable and can be achieved in a week, and saying, okay, we're going to work to this, and then by Friday, you're going to have hit that goal. And it's got to be something that you are 100% confident that the teacher can do. Don't say we're going to work on wait time, that just because that seems like an easy thing to you, if you don't think that teacher is really going to be able to accomplish it in a very short amount of time. Because if they can reach the goal in 3-5 days, then you're great. Some things that you can sort of think about, like I think about the Willie Nelson song, right? You got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. You got to know when to think about, okay, this is something that we're going to look at right now. This is something that we're going to focus on right now in an actual pedagogical or curricular context. And we can do this now. Like, we can accomplish this now. But you're going to have to be the biggest cheerleader on the face of the earth, because the person who's disillusioned is not going to feel that way. And then, you may even have a teacher come to you and say, I'm having so much classroom management struggle with my 6th period class. Can you please come in and help me? And you might find some things that need to be taken care of, that should be taken care of, but that you just know it's going to take a lot of
too big
lift. Say, let's save that for February. Let's focus on the things that can immediately address some of the problems now, but otherwise you're just going to need to sort of sit back, fold the cards, and wait until the future, so that you
write it out a little bit.
Yeah. And this is another big opportunity. Here's my big plug for Sibme, right? Record video of people, like capture that gold now that you can look back at in the spring semester or going into the summer months, or even the teacher can review over the summer when they're rested and they're feeling good. I remember looking back on video of myself in the classroom during this time period and just kind of, when you're in a healthy emotional state, kind of giggling about it and like, oh my gosh, what a crazy mistake. I would never have done that had I watched that video the day after I filmed it. So there's that old adage, comedy is tragedy plus time. Put some time between when the video gets filmed and when we review it.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite takeaways. You mentioned the new teacher induction course. One of my favorite activities, and it's one of the first ones mentioned, is, kind of from even day one, even before we're in the disillusionment phase, with our new teachers, getting them to start to record often and just hold on to those recordings. It's not about them going in and self-reflecting, especially with new teachers. They don't really have the reflective capacity at that time. Many don't, to do that on their own, but it's like you said, it's that gold that they get to save up for later on. And then the end of the year, giving them that process to, let's take a look back in time real quick and let's just celebrate how far we've come and the places we started out strong and continued strong, and to start to think about what our professional vision is for next year. So
yeah, because even if you've even an experienced teacher, even if you've closed that gap that you had in the middle of November, when you're watching that video at the end of the year, there's still something you can learn from that, right? It's very easy for me to fall back into old habits, and so I can say, well, I'm going to prevent that from happening next year, because that's really the thing. And And, you know, I mean, I think about sort of the last big picture here is, you know, I think about Carl Glickman's framework for differentiated coaching and, you know, this sort of ICF framework. You know, our goal is to sort of move teachers towards autonomy, to have them be autonomously reflective and being able to look back at what they did on their own and grow. But that, you know, at different periods throughout the year, your coaching style might need to shift from being instructive, where you're really giving someone resources, skills, pedagogical practices, really providing them with the information. You're modeling, you're giving them, you know, sample lesson plans, that sort of stuff. At other times, you need to be collaborative with them. You need to sort of sit down side by side and maybe co-plan a lesson, or find ways to really give that teacher, that coached teacher, more voice. And then, you know, ultimately the goal is to be facilitative, to be able to say, my role as the coach is really to just facilitate your own planning and development. And all I'm doing is asking questions like a therapist, right?
Right.
Well, you know, during this DEVOLSON period, you know, if I'm really struggling with something as a teacher, even though it's, you know, halfway through the school year, if you come in to me and you say to me, well, how do you think you should handle that problem in a sort of, which at the end of the year might not feel the same way, that can be really destructive to that coaching relationship, because what I hear is, you're not going to help me solve this. So you might need to be collaborative, or you might need to at sometimes even be instructive. You know, I'm sort of personally, philosophically, the sort of person who thinks that being instructive as a coach should always be reserved for a very small list of scenarios. But sometimes those scenarios come up during this DEVOLSON time period.
Yeah. Elena Aguilar in her—
give them this worksheet tomorrow. You can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Elena Aguilar in her book, The Art of Coaching, which is an oldie but goodie. It's not that old, but I've been rereading it recently, and she calls instructive coaching directive is kind of how she labels it. She said, you know, they can use synonymously, but she is a really great example of a teacher who was kind of in this, like, I am just doing the best I can to keep my head just barely above water. I just need you to tell me. Like, I get it. I know I'm supposed to be reflective, but tell me. And so knowing when, kind of going back to know when to hold them and know when to fold them kind of thing, knowing when you need to step into these different types of roles that are going to be the best bang for your buck with that time. And help deposit. Yeah.
I'll close with sort of a funny story about my own experience my first year teaching. You know, I was always bad at submitting attendance on time, like always.
Who's good at that? I mean, really.
And I mean, Corey, you know me, I'm bad at doing everything on time. But I didn't, you know, at the beginning of the year, we had people telling us, you know, you need to submit your ADA attendance. Your ADA attendance needs to go in at this particular time. It was 9:30 on my campus. And I didn't know what ADA stood for. I thought that it had something to do with the Americans for Disabilities Act. And I said, well, I don't have any disabled children in my classroom, so I guess this doesn't matter, so I can just submit my attendance whenever I want. You know, had my coach come in and been like, well, let's collaborate around this, or how do you think the solution, because I was getting in trouble every day. Like, the attendance office was calling at me every day. And
you in trouble? I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, you know, like, Jean was like, that's, you know, and she explained to me what it meant. And I was like, oh, okay, so this has to do with how we get paid. Okay, that's important. And then I started submitting at least my ADA attendance. So, you know, I mean, you know, sometimes you don't need to be collaborative or facilitative because it's an easy solution, you know,
right.
And those are the best opportunities. If you can find at this time of the year an easy solution for somebody and just give it to them and have them solve a problem, that's the trifecta, right? You're helping deposit in that bank account, you're building a relationship, you're meeting those sort of foundational Maslow needs, and they're growing, they're getting better. So, I mean, like, great, do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely looking for those opportunities. And again, I just think the awareness, you know, is powerful for us. You know, for me as a virtual coach, where I'm not tied to a particular campus or any campus really, and I'm working with teachers. It's a really good reminder for this time of year. I know it is for me just as a mom, as a mom with kids in school right now. I'm totally in that disillusionment phase where I'm trying to plan Thanksgiving dinner and put together lists for Christmas. And so yes, I need people to be a little bit more instructive with me for my own stuff. So
Yeah.
This has been an awesome conversation, TJ. I'm hoping somebody does find our blog post that we were missing on this topic, but I really
it's a
think
couple
it's
years
helpful.
old because I wrote it when I first started working here, so you can go back
Mhm.
pages in the blog to find the article. But
Yeah. Well,
find it and post it, and we'll be sure to send you a prize.
yes, definitely. We like to reward that type of behavior. I think it also would be interesting to hear from our viewers what ideas do they have for making those deposits at this time of year? What are you doing, or what ideas do you have? What's worked with you? I think it'd be great to just build up, because we're right in the thick of it. We're right in the middle of it. So, I mean, it's only mid-November, so we've still got another month and a half of this, a couple more weeks of school. Of this phase before people come back rejuvenated, excited for the new year. So this will be good. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, TJ. And audience, tune in next week for another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show.
Thanks a lot.